My name is State Representative Stephen Kulik. I'm from Worthington. I'm a Democrat. I've been in the legislature for 21 years representing the 1st Franklin District, which is 19 communities in Hampshire and Franklin counties, one town in Hampden County. And as far as the pipeline goes, the Kinder Morgan proposed pipeline, 5 of the 19 communities that I represent, actually 6 now with the rerouting, would be impacted directly in the route of the pipeline. Those communities are Plainfield, Ashfield, Shelburne, Conway, Deerfield, and Montague. So I've been very involved in this issue from the beginning. I first was contacted by folks from No Fracked Gas in Mass back in January or February when news of this project first happened. I attended a meeting in the town of Cummington in my district, which was very informative, got people really organized. Later in the State House, I attended a briefing in my State House office with 2 of my colleagues from the Senate, Senator Downing and Senator Rosenberg, where we heard a presentation from Kinder Morgan about what this project was in their view and how they hope to move forward with it. We were very skeptical at the time, and we told Kinder Morgan that we thought they had a very tough road ahead of them, which they sort of minimized that. I think they felt they had a compelling case to make in Massachusetts, and they didn't think they'd run into the opposition that they have. And I've been very pleased to be part of that opposition, raising serious questions, working with community groups, working with my colleagues in the legislature. We've had different briefings from Kinder Morgan. We've also, as a legislative delegation, met with members of the Patrick administration, Secretary of Energy, head of the DPU, the Commissioner of Energy Resources, and others. And I know all of my colleagues along the pipeline route have expressed grave concerns. Many of our communities have passed resolutions in opposition to the pipeline. We've had a number of meetings at the State House trying to really figure out where the pipeline proposal fits into the energy picture of Massachusetts' future. Is it necessary? What are the public health and safety and environmental and economic impacts of this project? I'm convinced that the negative impacts outweigh any positive impact whatsoever. I'm not convinced there is any positive impact. We have yet to see, I think, a detailed analysis of whether we need this energy that's proposed to be brought into Massachusetts. We don't even know if the energy transmitted through this pipeline would end up being consumed in Massachusetts and provide any useful benefit either for thermal heat or for electrical generation. And those are some of the things that concern me, and I feel that government, through NESCO, the New England States Coordinating Council on Energy, whatever its formal name is, and the 6 New England governors really jumped the gun on this. They really got out ahead of this issue and really invited this pipeline proposal to be made, almost welcoming it to come into New England and particularly Massachusetts without having done their due diligence in terms of long-term energy policy and how it fits into our goals of having a greater presence of renewable energy in our mix, solar, wind, other forms of energy, and whether or not this is A, contributing to our climate crisis, and B, whether we want to be supporting the generation and consumption of gas in Massachusetts that's coming from an environmentally dangerous process as they get fracked gas out of the Marcellus Shale and other areas in the Midwest. So many, many questions. I've been very engaged and very pleased to be a part of working with many community groups and with my colleagues in trying to push these hard questions against the company and to hold them accountable for what they're proposing would be a vastly negative impact, I think, on the Commonwealth.
And today's paper, we're talking about the town of Deerfield asking you, proposing to you to submit legislation requiring Kinder Morgan to pay royalties on any gas that would be ultimately shipped out for export that would not be consumed within the state, because that is really the numbers are staggering, how much gas they want to pipe through here, and we don't,
Right.
there's no way we can even use that amount if we use nothing else. Yeah.
Well, Deerfield has been great because I think they've been willing to stick their neck out and take a couple of really interesting legal approaches in their opposition to the pipeline, which would have a huge impact on Deerfield. Deerfield is a community, for those who aren't familiar with it, which has a very strong heritage in agriculture. It's some of the most fertile soil and most productive agricultural lands in the world, actually, in the Connecticut River Valley. And so opposition in Deerfield to the pipeline project has been very strong, very intense right from the beginning. People may be familiar with part of the original route was going to go through the Clarkdale Fruit Farm, fourth generation family farm in Deerfield that now is a little bit out of the direct line of the pipeline, but very close by. And so Deerfield is in a somewhat unique position in that the Board of Health is also the Board of Selectmen. That used to be very common many years ago, but most communities now have divided those responsibilities. But as such, the Board of Health has taken the initiative with the advice of a really very well-respected attorney, Cristobal Bonifaz, who lives in the town of Conway and has litigated similar issues in other communities, not with gas pipelines, but with other types of facilities that posed some public threat, public health threat in particular. So the Board of Health in Deerfield has gone through a process and exercising what they believe is their authority to declare that the pipeline, should it be built, would be a public health threat in the town of Deerfield. And they had a hearing, a process of asking Kinder Morgan for information. Kinder Morgan ignored the whole process. As such, after ignoring the process and going through the statutorily required circumstance here, that the town of Deerfield has basically told Kinder Morgan to cease and desist all activity within their community, acting as a Board of Health. After ignoring this process, Kinder Morgan ultimately, through their attorneys in Boston, responded to Deerfield and said, we just don't believe you have any jurisdiction here whatsoever. You're preempted by federal law, by the Federal Gas Act, and the same law that authorizes FERC to be an ultimate arbiter, if you will, in the siting and approval of pipeline. So that's one thing that Deerfield is doing. I commend them for doing it because I think if it's successful, it provides an instructive avenue for other communities to take as well. But the other thing that they're doing, and they will be in touch with me through the Board of Selectmen, is seeking legislation for Deerfield, which will require that royalty payments be paid to any landowner, should a pipeline be built in Deerfield, after all is said and done, that if the gas is not consumed in Massachusetts, if it's exported, many people speculate and no one refutes, not Kinder Morgan or any other entity, that it is entirely possible that a large percentage of this gas supply could be converted to liquid natural gas and exported overseas, either to Europe, to China, to wherever. And if that should happen, what Deerfield is proposing is that we have a law in Massachusetts that would require the utilities, or Kinder Morgan in this case, to pay royalties to the property owners through whom the pipeline passes through their property for the export, some type of royalty arrangement based on the export. So I think that's another very interesting idea, which again raises questions about the economic viability of this project. And I think that may ultimately be one of the Achilles heels that could help defeat this project, is attacking it on its economic viability, making sure that it isn't, that it would cost too much. And we've already, I think, through all of the citizen activism that's happened in the last few months, and it's been amazing. I've never seen, and I'm an old, 60s activist type of person, but I've seen many different movements over the years, but this one against the pipeline, I think has rallied so many people from so many different aspects and walks of life that I really believe Kinder Morgan was taken by surprise. They did not expect this. They thought, I think they were doing us a favor to propose this project and help relieve us from some of our energy uncertainty in the future. But I think that the outcry, the pushback has been so intense and well-informed and well-organized that that's a significant reason why they have now chosen to reroute part of their project out of Massachusetts up into New Hampshire and eastward on to reconnect and Drake it. So Massachusetts has led the way on this. I hope it's of some inspiration and value to our friends in New Hampshire who are now facing many, many miles of this pipeline potentially going through their state.
Yeah, and we're all really afraid of the top of the pipeline of these compression stations.
Yep.
And we talked about one of your constituents, Stephen Wicks, who made a video. He went down to Pennsylvania and a very similar pipeline and said, from an aerial view, the mileage between these compressor stations, and Kinder Morgan at first said there would be two,
Mm-hmm.
one in Wright and one in Drake it, and then that's 4 and 5
Right.
and maybe 6. But they're saying every 50, 60 miles, and what he found was it was between 19 and 22 miles, and they've got 11 of them
Mm-hmm.
along a similar route.
Yep.
So, and how loud and all those things, if you want to talk about the possibility that one might be in your area.
Oh, I don't doubt that if the pipeline were built, there would be at least one in my area, in the district that I represent. From the beginning of this, from the information as best people could glean it, because Kinder Morgan has not been particularly forthcoming in their route maps and their planning. Much of this has been behind the scenes, but people felt that it was very likely there would be a compressor station somewhere perhaps around the border between the towns of Ashfield and Conway. And that's a great concern because that's an area of important, critical natural resources in that area. But also, these are small communities, and there was a special town meeting held in Ashfield in June that I attended that people from the fire department in Ashfield got up and spoke about their concerns that if there were a compressor station in their community or close by, and if there were an accident at that compressor station, that the types of volunteer and call fire departments that serve our communities would not have the equipment, the expertise, the training, the ability to deal with such an emergency. And that could be one of the reasons Kinder Morgan puts these things out into more rural areas if they can, to get them away from people. But you also have to look at the issue of emergency response and public safety. I think that's an important one. Now, there's been some speculation that the original thought of a compressor station in that area of Ashfield-Conway might change now, and I've heard talk of a larger compressor station. So perhaps there would be more distance between them, but there would be much, much bigger, and one that might be located in the Deerfield area, perhaps somewhere near Clarkdale Farm, not on their farm property, but somewhere nearby. And that has many local officials very worried because if they have fewer compressor stations but much larger ones, they will take a much bigger footprint of land. I've heard upwards of 70 acres for one. They do have enormous noise and light impacts. Again, we're talking about small towns. We're talking about agricultural and residential communities primarily. So that's a great concern. Public safety response, the dangerousness of these. I haven't seen Steve's video of that Pennsylvania trip yet, but I'm going to watch it very soon with great interest because I think the whole issue of the compressor stations is one that hasn't received the attention that it deserves because I think in many ways they present a much greater public impact. You know, if the pipeline is really buried, it's there and it has this unusable right-of-way over it, which is unfortunate. And I've heard from farmers in my district that the pipeline is proposed to go through their farmland. They won't be able to cross from one parcel into another. And their farms will become less economically viable as farms and operating businesses. So that's of great concern. But these compressor stations, I think, could be the biggest threat in this whole plan. And people need to look at it seriously. They need to look at the public safety aspects of it. Accidents do happen at these. They've been documented elsewhere. Yes, I think that if the pipeline were to be built, one would likely end up in one of the 6 communities that I represent.
And I know that they intentionally vent at those compressor stations.
They do.
Too. And no, studies, really big studies have been done about the effects of methane, but it is definitely concluded that it is a worse carbon emitter in the long term than carbon dioxide, and that, for climate change, it's worse, much worse.
It's much worse to have these releases of methane gas from the compressor stations. And also mixed in with that, releases of some of the chemicals that are used in the mining of the gas, in the fracking process. The trace element, that's a very chemically intensive method of mining gas in the shale territory. And that, again, people don't know the health effects. People don't know what's really in that, those chemicals. Again, public health, I think Deerfield was absolutely correct to pursue this as a public health issue because they have to guarantee and protect the public health.
Yeah, I know in some of the states in the South, the ALEC group proposed legislation, I think it passed, that if an employee told the names of all those chemicals that were used, it would be a felony.
Wow.
And I don't know if, our legislature can get a disclosure on that, because there are, and Steve has them listed in his video.
That's interesting.
Of all those chemicals. And then my understanding is once they've got that easement, that 50-foot wide easement, they have, that's forever.
Yep.
And they have the right to fly over with helicopters and spray to keep any trees from, growing there. And we wouldn't know what was in that spray.
Right.
We wouldn't know when that was happening necessarily. And people, a lot of people have wells and, and farms and cattle and sheep.
Yep, children.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So that's a very good point. I think that's another very useful thing that the legislature that we in Massachusetts could look at is certainly the maintenance of these rights-of-way with herbicides and how that might go up against public health standards and also local control issues, because I know that we have strict application laws or regulations in Massachusetts for the use of agricultural pesticides already, and aerial spraying is tightly regulated. So how this would fit into that is very important. And I think the issue of disclosure of the chemicals is a very interesting one. I'm happy to pursue that and look into that.
Yeah, and I think that also the study that was taken in terms of need, and I know that DeVol Patrick has asked for another study because it wasn't, it didn't take into consideration all the solar that's going on.
No.
Right over your head is this check to the town, a couple checks from the green communities. So it's not like we're doing nothing to replace,
Well, Massachusetts has been #1 in the country, and something we can all be very proud of in adopting renewable energy, particularly solar. We have the Green Communities Act. We had passed the Global Warming Solutions Act a number of years ago. We have very high goals for renewable energy in the future. And so that's one of the things that we don't think was taken into account when NESCO, including our governor, our DPU chair, were part of that and adopted this New England request, really, to bring enhanced gas capacity into New England. And now they're taking a step back. And again, I give people great credit. This would not have happened if not for the citizen reaction to Kinder Morgan's initial plan, which came on very quickly. Again, I think Governor Patrick, it was almost a given that we need the gas and that the ratepayers were going to pay for it through a tariff. Well, the tariff's now off the table. And in terms of the need for the gas, they've at least stepped back and are doing this alternative low-impact study now, something that should have been done at the front end of the process, not at the back end of the process. So that'll be good to see, and we expect to see it sometime before the end of 2014.
Yeah, and many of the people that I've been interviewing already have the solar.
That's
really
right.
do.
That's right. And communities, the Green Communities Act has been very well received in central and western Massachusetts. And so, in fact, I should look at I haven't done this yet, but the overlay, the green communities that have been designated with the route of the pipeline would be rather ironic to see. But my guess is that many of the towns that are green communities designated have the pipeline. I know Deerfield, off the top of my head, certainly Montague, Deerfield, Ashfield is a green community. I think Plainfield is. But the ones in the Berkshires and other Franklin County communities, we should look that up.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
Yeah.
And then the price of this pipeline keeps going up from 2 to 4, now it's
Right,
9.
right. So what is the real cost, and who's going to pay for it if it should be built? And is it economical? Does this really contribute to a more stable pricing structure for energy in the future? Is it smart for us to be relying on a fossil fuel when we know it's a limited, finite resource?
Yeah, several of the interviewees have talked about the fact that those wells are running dry much faster than they ever thought they would. You know, 70% or so is gone in the first 18 months.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they have to build another well and another well and
Right,
another well.
right. You know, the gas companies talk about this as being almost an unlimited resource for the next 50 to 100 years, and I'm not sure we can believe that.
The reason, you know, from Drake, it's going to go north to the Maritimes, like you said, for LNG. That pipe was coming down from Nova Scotia from an offshore well that
Right.
dried up after 5
That's right.
years.
That's right. That's right.
So what's the point here?
Right.
We can, and if Pennsylvania stops fracking, which it might,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's a big movement. They're not asleep. They're
Right.
not all asleep down there.
Right.
But if they stop fracking, what's going to come through this pipe anyway?
Exactly.
So it doesn't seem like there's any
Excuse me.
point to going through this
Right.
kind of damage. and
Exactly.
Heartbreak.
It is.
Absolutely
It is heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. People, I interviewed somebody yesterday in Plainfield, a woman that built her own home
Excuse me.
and raised all her own food, and she would not be able to stay there.
Mm.
Yeah. So thank you for all that you're doing.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for all the citizens and local officials and my colleagues in the legislature are doing, because this is a serious challenge to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.